I am present.
Okay, this is supposedly working.
Good, how are you?
Excellent, thank you.
We're going to put Dr. Knox right next to the telephone. She's on the phone.
So I think it's worth noting that we are now recording audio, and I'll let Kimye kind of open the session, but just so everyone on the phone knows and everyone in the room that we're now recording audio, and this will be posted on the website shortly after the meeting concludes, as with every meeting.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you guys. Thanks everyone for making the time to come and also for volunteering your valuable time to this group. We're going to start with just a round of introductions, but I'm Kimye. I'll be helping to facilitate the group, and hopefully once you guys select a chair and vice chair, I'll really just be playing a support role. We have Dr. Rachel Knox on the phone, and Catherine from Prosper Portland let me know in advance that she would not be able to attend this meeting, so she regrets that she won't be here for this meeting, but she will be here for the next. And we should be seeing Madeline and John soon. I am a little nervous, so bear with me. I've been in this position for officially 4 weeks, 3.5 weeks, and so my learning curves are kind of intersecting right now. So I have, you should have an agenda inside your folder. Tonight, you'll be doing a lot more taking in information than I generally like to do in these sorts of groups, but there is a lot of important information to share. Okay, so as you'll see, that's kind of the layout for tonight. You received it via email, so we'll just jump right in. Go ahead and go around the table if you could. State your name clearly for everybody. If you have a preferred pronoun, please let us know. Tell a little bit about yourself, and then if you can think of something, what's a cannabis-related headline that recently has caught your eye? And you have 3 or 4 minutes each to talk about this, so I know. Why don't you start here and then we'll
Sure.
come back.
Yeah, I'm Brandon Goldner. I'm the supervisor of the city's cannabis program, he, him, his. A bit about myself. I've been working with the city since 2015 in different roles with the cannabis program, been supervising for a little over a year. And in my free time, I'm a huge Blazers fan. I have a Blazers podcast. I like to play basketball. Basketball is something that makes me happy, so I really, that's something that I dig quite a bit. And then a cannabis-related headline, I've been really focusing on what's happening at the state level right now, and so to see there are a couple of bills that are getting hearings and getting consideration. The most notable for us has been the social consumption stuff, which our program has been pushing for a couple of years now. I'm excited about that. So that's a little bit about me.
My name is Alexander Furchak, and I am with the City Auditor's Office. So I am not a member of the staff team right here. But with the City Auditor's Office, I work for Audit's Services Division, and we just started an audit of how the city regulates cannabis. And we're sort of dividing this project into 2 sections. And the first section is we're looking at the city's 3% tax, and specifically how the city is using that tax. So the objective of that audit project is, is the city using the tax according to what was the intent for the ballot member? And so some of the questions we'll be asking is, how is that money allocated, who's benefiting from that tax, and basically, is it accountable, is it inclusive, and again, does it meet the language of the ballot measure? So the second part of the audit project will be looking at more specifically at regulation of cannabis and specifically at civic life and also possibly BDS. So we haven't quite determined the objective for that audit, but we're going to get to that once we finish the tax project. Yeah, so what we'll do most likely is when we're done with the audit, we'll come back to this committee and report our findings to you. Something that we are looking for when we're auditing is we definitely look for input and feedback from you guys. So if you have any kind of, if you have questions, if you have areas of concerns when it comes to cannabis regulation, and this could be citywide, it doesn't have to just include civic life, but it also can also be BDS, or whether it's fire or any other areas that you're interested that we should audit, like you think would benefit from the audit, then definitely let me know. That would be really great because we're looking for feedback, especially for when it comes to cannabis regulation. So what we do in my office once we finish a project, we issue a public report, and that then is basically issued. It has recommendations. Those recommendations usually go either to the bureau or to council. And in this case, will probably be directed at civic life, maybe BDS, but probably most generally to council. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Any questions about the audit or what we're doing at this point? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jay Shoemaker. I am the manager, a manager within BDS. I'm in the inspection division, and one of my specific assignments is the coordinator for the BDS Cannabis Facility Program. It is a program that we've talked about for a couple of years as we have gone through the process of trying to figure out what we are doing and how we can effectively respond. Unfortunately, I had the opportunity from the director, Rebecca, to take on this particular challenge and to begin to understand how BDS can better respond to the industry. A number of you here, familiar faces, who joined us for focus groups, and you have met elsewhere, as we're trying to understand how we can assist your industry to come and meet or be able to meet many of the codes and standards that the state has required the city to meet, and the city meets it through the Bureau of Development Services. There's one aspect of it that I continue to be marveled at, and that is the fact that this industry went from not being legal in the state of Oregon, as it still isn't elsewhere, to being a highly regulated industry in an incredible short period of time. And we all had very difficult growing pains in figuring out how to respond. One of the keys, though, to stress is, and it's one of the campaigns I continue to work on within Bureau of Development Services, and that is there is nothing unique about the cannabis industry. Everything you do in one form or another, product may be different, process may be different, is done in the city of Portland under the codes. And so what I'm looking to do, in part, is to make sure that we're responding even-handedly to the issues you have, much as we would deal with them otherwise. Part of the shock I mentioned earlier of going to being kind of a non-industry to one highly regulated is one we ourselves are getting used to understanding what that actually means. So I think there'll be some list of who's in attendance. I didn't bring cards this evening, a little short-minded, to invite you all at any time in any way I can be of some assistance, or more importantly, help you get the assistance you're looking for. Please feel free to contact me.
Hello, my name is Arania Brown. I work for City of Portland with the Cannabis program as the administrative coordinator. So I handle the licenses and applications when they come in. Preferred pronouns is she and her. I like Zumba and boxing. And a headline that has recently caught my eye is social consumption.
All right. Tim Zimmerman, I recognize a lot of you in here. On indoor cultivation systems, out of retail also on the coast. Let's see. A bit about myself. I'm an owner-operator, self-funded, borrow anything. I'm here to champion common sense policies and hopefully give some alternatives, offer some alternatives to maybe some of the crazy ones that come through here. Believe me, there's a lot. And I mean, headlines that have caught, I don't know, not cannabis related, but so anyways, thanks. I'm sure we'll all get to hang out.
I'm John, Finest Family Farms, a lead cultivator, vertically integrated store at the Home Village, focusing on high-end craft, organic, sustainable products. Single father, got 2 children. Cannabis-related topics. Definitely the consumption's a big part of our industry right now. I think we all like to see that happen for all of us. Businesses thrive. That's it.
If you don't mind, we'll pause for one moment. Dr. Knox, can you hear everyone okay? Uh-oh.
Are you asleep?
She probably did mute. Are you on mute?
Hey.
Hi, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
I did talk to you. For the most part, I can hear the two guys who just spoke sort of sounded distant. I don't know if they're the farthest away or something, but I can make out most.
Okay. We will try and position some of these. We're in a much larger room and a massive table here, so try and position things so that you can hear a little bit better. Okay, thank you.
Hi everybody, I am Laura Vega. I go by she, her. I'm an owner-operator of Green State of Mind. We're a processor here in Portland. We do business in 5 states, including Puerto Rico. So nice to see Dr. Knox there. I hope you're having fun, not working too hard. But we have our base of operations here in Oregon, which is our favorite place. And we make oil and we make edibles. We've been doing it for 5 years now. We started in the medical market, moved to recreational, and I think cannabis-related headline would be, the biggest one I saw was that huge bust of hemp that they thought was cannabis in Idaho, ended up being hemp. So I thought that was very interesting federally, because it'll be interesting to see what the DEA decides to do about the very small distinction between cannabis and hemp long term.
My name is Stephanie Neal, and I am Oregon's Finest Sustainability. Well, actually, I was Oregon's Finest Sustainability Coordinator. I'm so used to saying that. I'm actually now the Director of HR and Compliance, as well as the Pro Store Manager. I've been around since 2016. I saw the end of the medical days and the switch over to early recreational sales. I go by Sheep, and I'm here to learn as much as I can about legitimizing our industry. Public consumption's been on my radar, and so I was very brave the other day and went down to the Capitol with the OCA to lobby our senators for the upcoming legislation. And I look forward to seeing how it's voted on.
Hi everyone, my name is Sam Chapman. I wear quite a few hats in the industry. I think the one that's most relevant to this group is I'm the legislative director for the New Revenue Coalition. We are a coalition of organizations such as Oregon Normal, represented by Madeline Martinez down the way here, along with businesses, parents, different folks from all over the place, renters, medical cannabis patients, all advocating for the passage of meaningful social cannabis consumption reform down in Salem. So I've helped author the Senate bill that has a hearing next week on Thursday, and my pronouns are he, him, his. And since everyone's definitely mentioned consumption before in the headlines, that's great. I'm glad that people are mentioning that, and that means we're doing our job. And the headline that I would like to, that caught my eye, or rather the headline that has not caught my eye but should, is the conversation that's happening in the legislature right now about production licensing caps and how there is a lack of conversation about what avenues that the legislature intends to create for people who have been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs to still have an avenue into the market, despite the fact that we may have a glut of product. For those of you who have known me longer than a year, you probably know that I've been doing drug policy reform for the last decade of my life. I got started in college, and I am first and foremost an advocate and a passionate one at that, for better or for worse at times. So I'll leave it there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tiara Darnell, and my pronouns are she, her. I write. You can see some of my work in Travel Portland, Willamette Week, and soon a national publication. That's my vision for 2019. Gonna make it happen. And I do video. So if you saw the New Leaf video they did, the profile of Adrian from Greenbox, that's some of my work. I also podcast and got a fellowship with Spotify to help bring my podcast called Hi Good People to life. So I do a little bit of all the multimedia. And I should say, I guess, that I work for the city of Portland, but I'm here as a journalist capacity. So there's that. And I have two headlines that caught my eye. The serious one is this gentleman from Mississippi who was here in Oregon, bought, I forgot how much cannabis. It was a little bit, but anyway, I think he forgot that it was in his bag. He went back to Mississippi. Anyway, he's a musician, a Jamaican national, and he's going to jail for 12 years because of somehow they found out, someone in Mississippi found out that he had it, and he's going away for 12 years. And the image of him and his son, who's probably like 3 years old, just is really visceral in my mind. So that's really terrible. And the other thing to kind of lighten it up a little bit, I saw this today. Drake and Adele went to a vape lounge, got high, and then went bowling. So people cared about that. It was shared thousands of times after just a few hours of being posted. And I think that I bring that up just because it's funny how something that's not a story is a story and how it gets shared. So that's something that I think about as a communications professional. I did share it. Also hashtag squad goals.
Hi, I'm Nicole Bowles. I'm a research assistant professor at OHSU. My pronouns are she and her. I've been studying the cannabinoid signaling for the last 13 years, mostly focusing on stress regulation and metabolism. And since being at OHSU, focused on sleep as well. So how does cannabis exposure impact sleep, as well as stress regulation. And then I also look at health disparities and different stress resiliency by race and long-term goal to develop interventions to minimize or improve resiliency, minimize the negative side effects of stress. Let's see. Other things about myself, I have a 10-month-old named Walker. And as far as a headline, recent one was that UCLA has started a cannabis research initiative, and so they, just like Washington, also has a cannabis research society, and so I would love if I could, Oregon or OHSU would have one as well. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and in part that's because we are lacking on research, because we're lacking on the funds. It's hard to get federal funding to do cannabis research.
Sorry, what is, I didn't catch the name.
My name, Nicole Bowles.
Okay. I'm looking at the list that Timmy set out with a bunch of us on it, and I don't see everybody who said their names on the list. I'm trying to follow along. Sorry to interrupt, but I highly recommend that you come to the Oregon Cannabis Commission meeting. Happy to keep you guys abreast of that. I can explain more, but you mentioned research, and so the Oregon Cannabis Commission has made one of its requested or recommended initiatives to the state to develop that research center. It was already in a bill several years ago, but no way to facilitate that. So like where to get the financing, et cetera. So it is on the table, but I highly recommend you guys and everybody come to these meetings because this is the new body that's been created to advise OLCC and OHA and at the state level.
Yeah, I know from that initiative, another initiative was put forward at OHSU and went to the president there to kind of get them to start to hope that maybe more state money would come. But we do have a new president, so that's mostly just been sitting on his desk. But yeah, I'm aware of those initiatives.
Dr. Knox, would you like to go next?
Yeah, you know what? Sure. Okay, so Dr. Rachel Knox. I am a clinician, a medical doctor, formerly trained in family medicine and integrative medicine. However, these days I go by the title endocannabinologist, which is a fancy way of saying I'm a physician who studies the function and dysfunction of the endocannabinoid system, and also cannabinology or cannabinoid medicine, which is the study of the pharmacology of cannabinoids or cannabinomimetic molecules or other botanicals that work on the endocannabinoid system to augment it, supplement it, etc., with the the goal of helping patients find some healing. So that's what I do by training these days, and along with my family, co-founded the American Cannabinoid Clinic, where we practice what we call functional endocannabinology, and it's adjunctive care to the conventional system. We also founded the Advent Academy, and we have the first sort of full spectrum training course for healthcare professionals who are looking for clinical preparedness. So taking all the science and the pharmacology and the physiology of the endocannabinoid system and applying it clinically as opposed to just educating us on the science and facts. So with our several years now of experience, we are branching into training our fellow healthcare providers so that they can do what we do. So that's really exciting for us as we're venturing into that as a collective. And my family is my mom and dad, my sister, and myself. So it's really great to work with my, Portland-based family. Other than that, I am a board member of New Leaf, the Horton Project. Happy to be part of that, and the medical chair for the Minority Cannabis Business Association. So I am in Puerto Rico for our annual mandatory board in-person board retreat. So I'm really sorry I couldn't be there today to meet all you guys in person. I'm gonna have to re-meet you when I get back into town because I can't see your faces. But yeah, so I'm really interested in regulations because as a clinician, it's super important to me that regulation should also be common sense, as we said that earlier, but that positively impacts health, education, services, and also facilitate community revitalization for the communities who are impacted by the war on drugs, and from a health perspective as well as social equity perspective and wealth generation, et cetera. What else? I can't stress enough that common sense policy hinges on the accurate understanding of the plant, both its botany and pharmacology, and how it interacts with ECS. And I think to date, a lot of regulations have not been informed at all by science, which is really unfortunate. And so, I feel like we have a lot of reworking to do around a lot of our current policies so that it reflects accurately the science. And let's see, a headline that impacted me recently was one. So I get a lot of medical journal newsletters, and an article that came into my mailbox the other day was titled "One-Time Cannabis Use May Alter Teen Brain." And unfortunately, the article did not prove, but actually said, all the studies that we've conducted actually show that one-time use doesn't alter teen brain. But what's very frustrating to me is that the headline was that it does, right? And so medical professionals who might just be headline readers, read an article like that, and they continue to propagate misinformation to all of our detriment. And I can tell you this is one of many articles that have just been increasing in frequency into my email inbox through, what we call reputable medical journals and medical news sites that are just continuing to feed healthcare professionals with negative propaganda.
Thank you. Daniel?
Yeah. I am Daniel Rowland, he, him, his. I am the Director of Operations for Fleschner Construction. We've been involved in the cannabis industry since prior to it being an industry. So we've been helping growers build grow rooms, dispensaries, BHO extraction, all types of extraction in labs, and we've just been highly involved in the industry from the beginning. I know a lot of the officials in the room right now, and a lot of people in the room I've met or worked with on different projects and figuring out, trying to help with policy, and at least by putting in my input. Fleschner Construction has been around since 2008, and the owner of the company was involved in and highly believes in the cannabis industry and was involved in it as growing up, coming from Humboldt County, so he knows a lot about the industry as a whole and just where it's gone from illegal to legal, and he's got a lot of passion for trying to be a part of making it where it's going right now. So we've been successful in that, and we're hoping we can help do some informed policy decision helping. So that's about it. Cannabis-related headline was I just saw it as I was coming in. I actually didn't have time to read it yet, but the OLCC commissioners just adopted rules for regulating industrial hemp entering the system. So I'm interested to read that as I leave here today. But I've been kind of following the hemp stuff in the Farm Bill a bit recently, just trying to get my head wrapped around how that's going to affect us in the industry. So.
My name is Al Ochosa. I'm the Director of Licensing for Cura Cannabis Solutions, the makers of Select Oil and Select CBD. I go him, he, him, and his. A little bit about myself. After 20 years in the commercial insurance industry, got into the cannabis industry September 2015. And for the company, I basically handle all the regulatory affairs, permitting, licensing, governmental and community affairs, risk management, insurance, and a couple other hats. So, I've been wanting to be able to serve in a capacity on CPOT for a long time because, I felt that there needed to be a little bit broader representation on the committee. So I'm excited to see that, there's several faces from different segments of the industry and different stakeholders. So I'm excited to see that at this table. And some of the things that, I've been passionate about doing, obviously, is, working on social equity programs. I worked on the tax allocation subcommittee last year. So I was very excited to see, that moving forward. Obviously, social consumption is a big hot button. So hopefully we can do some good here. But yeah, I'm originally from Seattle, graduated from UW, been married 20 years, have 2 teenage kids, 2 cats and a bird.
Sounds like some harmony.
And then a recent cannabis headline that I actually just read today. I just read that the city of San Francisco issued its first dispensary license to a social equity applicant. It's only he was only the second African American dispensary licensee through a social equity program in the state of California. The one prior to that was a person in Oakland that got their license. So I'd be excited to be able to move that needle here in Portland as well. Unfortunately, with the pause on any new licensing with OLCC, you're probably not going to see a lot of new licensees come on board. But I think there's still ways to be able to help people get into the industry. The folks that were impacted the most by the war on drugs and prohibition. So that's definitely a big thing for me. So just excited to be here.
Madeline.
Hi, I'm Madeline Martinez. I am on the board of directors of Normal National, big deal, in Washington, D.C. But I'm also the executive director of Oregon Normal here locally. And in 2009, I opened the first in the United States Cannabis Cafe because patients needed a place to go. And there wasn't a place for us. We had to, just like we do today, we have to go hide under a carport or in the shadows, quite frankly. And in these elements that are so hideous, it is really hard when you're a medical marijuana patient and have no place to go. And you can't smoke in your apartment or your government housing or anywhere, really. We're like lepers in society. And so I decided to open this place to have that option of people coming in and having a safe space to consume cannabis. But along the way, I've also done a lot of lobbying in, I don't even remember what year, but I was able to go down there and actually change the law from 3 ounces of marijuana to 24 ounces of usable stored marijuana per patient. And so right now, I'm working with Sam Chapman here with New Revenue Coalition to make the changes that are necessary at the legislature to provide for patients to consume cannabis safely and out of public view following the laws. But my name, and I'm a she and a her, or however that goes, because I'm not real familiar with it. And wow, I have so much to say and so little time. I also am working on the board of New Leaf with Laura. And it's really exciting because it has changed so much. And what I'm trying to say is that one day I was a medical marijuana activist, and the next day there was a medical marijuana industry, cannabis industry, right in front of my very eyes. So things have changed so quickly, and my biggest fear was realized that not people of color weren't involved. There wasn't any diversity or any equity. I'm the only brown person that I know in the state of Oregon that was actually doing something and getting involved until Laura and Orlando came along. And now I'm so proud to say that it's getting so diverse. And the headline, I just heard it from you. I'm not sure what your name is.
Tiara.
I just heard it from you that someone left the state of Oregon with cannabis. And if you come to the state of Oregon and you can purchase cannabis, how can you not leave with it? And how can you not have a safe space to consume it? I don't know. I just feel it's so wrong that we entice people to come here to enjoy our freedoms, but then they really can't. And that's the thing that you said about that, somebody leaving and did they get busted in Mississippi?
Yeah, Madison
County.
County.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's my big push right now, and I've been lobbying for years, and I'm hoping to continue. I'll be out there on the 28th lobbying for social consumption, Senate Bill 639. 639. Mm-hmm. You are welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sir Gree, and I have the pleasure of serving as director for the Office of Community and Civic Life, which is where the cannabis program resides. I have the pleasure of working with these great colleagues. I just chose to sit here because I always like the door and the water. I don't know. The view's a little bit better for turning around. So it's great. Sometimes people ask, why is the cannabis program in the Office of Community and Civic Life? And I remind them about our mission. Our mission is around the culture of civic engagement. And as many of you shared in your introductions, that's what it took. The work that you're doing represents social change, and you can't just stop. The fact, and you're not stopping, but we also have to keep remembering that this work is not just about economics and the industry and regulations, but it's about the social change and the society that we want to create. And so thank you for bringing that passion to this work. And the headline that hasn't been written yet, but somebody told me a long time ago, may not be true, but I choose to believe it, that whenever an industry or an organization starts, the era, of course, like the decade specifically, but the era in which they're founded really shapes the creature that it becomes later. So I can't wait to read the headline, maybe 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, about how this era, this table, that all of you helped shape who we became as a state of Oregon, and the economy, and the hopefully the social justice that we also brought back to the to balance out the harm from this work from many decades ago. So I think that's a headline I'm looking forward to reading in many years from now when I'm retired.
So I'm Kimie Uyoka. I am coordinator 2, but that encompasses the liaison role for the CPOT group and supporting you in accessing the resources, information, presentations, whatever support you need in shaping your final report for SOOC, and also supporting you in doing some brainstorming, seeking out other outside information, as well as utilizing the resources within our program to better serve the communities here in Portland. That's the industry, as well as all Portlanders who are now living in this new world of recreational cannabis, and also helping to shape the conversation publicly here. A little bit about me. I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old at home. I started out my life as a teacher, and then I shifted into public health and health justice, and transitioned over the last few years into government work. I worked in the liquor licensing and liquor policy world here for the city over the last year or so, and was knee-deep in helping to explore opportunities for improving and refining liquor policy at the city level when this opportunity popped up. And we'll get into a little bit more about the path that brought us to this point, but there's some intersection there for me around cannabis and patient rights. So I was excited at this opportunity. What cannabis-related headline has recently caught my eye? Well, in addition to some of the ones that have been brought up at the table, this is just kind of at the forefront of my mind, and I've just been mulling it over. As I am new in this program, I'm also playing catch up on the last however many years worth of headlines and articles, and the Malcolm Gladwell article. And I'm sorry to bring it up.
That's okay. We gotta talk about it.
Nobody did, actually. I was wondering.
But I have been such a fan of his, sports journalism, right? His books, and so it was, I think, a really valuable experience actually to read something written by somebody that I have a lot of respect for, typically in his writing, and then to read something that I did not fully embrace. So, and then I start looking back at everything else that he's written.
I burnt my books, I'm not gonna lie. I appreciate everybody taking a moment to introduce themselves. As you see, this is a public advisory body, so the public is invited to observe, and there's time at the end of the meeting for anyone who'd like to make public comment, but thank you for coming as well. All right. We are mostly on time. Hopefully everyone has a moment to eat and get situated. Alexander, was there any more information that you wanted to share with us about the audit?
Yeah, I think I'm going to leave some referrals and information about about our office, about audit services and who we are. And I really welcome any feedback. I may be contacting some of you guys during this audit, but please let me know if there's anything you would like to add, any areas you would like the city auditor to focus our efforts in. We are very much welcome that feedback. That would be really great, because that's such a part of what we do initially when we look for an audit objective, to make sure that we focus our resources where it's most added, most valuable. So please let me know. Don't hesitate. And we are, one thing I should say, which I've been asked before, we are not auditing the cannabis businesses, and we are not auditing the grant recipients. So make that clear, because I've been asked many times already. Thank you. Thanks.
This is probably a good opportunity, kind of organically too. I don't know if Sook or Brandon, you can speak to this, but the relationship between the cannabis program and the cannabis tax, and management of the cannabis tax, just for everybody to be kind of on the same page with information.
Sure, and I will talk more about that after the break. Between 7:45 and 8:05. Yeah, no, totally. But basically, our program has had very little involvement up to this point with the local cannabis tax. A lot of the decisions that were made after the ballot measure was passed were made by the mayor's office, by CPO, and then there was a process that was led by Commissioner Daly's office and Commissioner Fritz's office for a portion of those cannabis tax revenues that went towards the record clearing, the expungement, the small business support, the economic development, workforce development pieces of it. The cannabis program had a seat at the table when we were deliberating about the recipients, but that was the extent of our involvement up to this point. But that will be changing, and again, I will be talking more about that after the break. But up to this point, it's been quite separate, the program and the tax, but that will be changing in the future.
So there's no way to get around this. We have to talk about some very dry stuff. As CPOT is a formal public advisory body for the city of Portland, that means that your role is really to discuss and provide input into the development of policies for our program around cannabis, providing advising and opinions around things that could be improved, even if it goes into your thoughts around what should be done with the tax or what could be done differently between the relationship with BDS or zoning. These are all things that you can provide feedback and input and advising to us on. But things that are within the scope of this bureau's purview and this program, the cannabis program specifically, you have more direct kind of influence and impact over. So your role is to provide review and feedback on policies and procedures for this program, to help us to check on the progress of previous decisions and program activities, things that are taking place, to help us to forecast and predict to the best of our shared abilities about emerging community needs and marketplace trends, and to provide some preliminary advising through the annual reports that you'll create to the program and the Civic Life Bureau Director, Sook. Also, many of you are having direct experiences and interactions with the mechanics of our licensing and regulation. And so that sort of feedback and that sort of input is also welcomed around operations, things that are working for you or not working for you. And if there are things that that we can address without any other required
ordinance changes or things like that. If it's really kind of a low-level procedural thing, we'll do our best to take a look at what the impact could be of making that change, and if it's appropriate, we can make those sorts of changes. So please help us identify those if you are someone who's working directly with our licensing and regulation. Things to consider as a formal public advisory body. You are designated as a public official, and you will go through the trainings that are required, some basic mandatory trainings. We can talk about how you want to structure these. Some of them I'm still working with the team of people who help support me in supporting you, and they are working hard to get some online web-based versions of some of these trainings that you can do. It's a 15-minute city HR training. So hopefully we'll have those soon. I'm getting some guidance around how to support you in getting these trainings done, but there are a couple of HR trainings and kind of an equity 101 training to make sure that everybody has the same foundation and the same baseline, and the more in-depth public official training, and that one is usually done by our representative from the city attorney's office, Tony Garcia. If you have an interest in looking at that in advance of us finding a date to do that, it's about a 40-minute long training. The slides, the PowerPoint slides from his training are available on the Civic Life website. It's a little kind of crazy to get there, so I can send you, I'll email you a link to that if you'd like to take a look at that. But we'll go through some key points right now so you have a sense of what you're getting yourself into.
Can I sneak in a quick comment?
Yes, please do.
So for those of you who may have either served on CPOT or may be familiar with it from last time, this may feel a little different, right? There was a push at the city level to get more consistency with state public records, public advisory meeting law, consistency around the city to make sure that all these public advisory bodies are meeting statute. And so that's part of the reason why, it feels a little bit more formal and different from the last time that we met. So I just wanted to make that point clear. We're actually one of the first advisory bodies that from early on, months before this meeting, the creation of the bylaws, had that guidance in place, working closely with our public advisory body experts to make sure that we were tight on all of that stuff. And so we take it very seriously and appreciate your understanding of that. So thank you.
So I'll just go through some of the key points. I will be asking you regularly, to the point where it might seem like comedy, I will be giving you the opportunity to self-report any conflicts of interest. You've already filled out the conflict of interest form in your application, but throughout our conversations, I will pause just before we go into a new topic or at the start of each meeting and ask, does anybody have any conflicts of interest with any items that are on the agenda today that you would like to announce for the group, and then we can move on. It doesn't mean you have to remove yourself from the conversation necessarily. It's just giving an opportunity for full transparency. It's giving you an opportunity to be upfront with any potential that you might have for financial interest from the conversation, or if that were to lead to some other changes within the program, the bureau, or at the city level in policy that could your business could benefit from. So
I'll be asking that regularly. I've been told to ask it regularly and often, so I will do both. Public meetings law. There are some parameters around public meetings law. Basically, we will be operating at the highest level of transparency for the majority of our conversations and our documentation. So everything that I provide to you in these meetings, or everything that you ask for others to provide to us, for the most part, will be put online on the CPOT website, on the webpage, shortly after the meeting, within 1 or 2 days. We have audio. We'll be posting the audio itself, and then we also will be working with the service to have the audio transcribed and translated as well. And so right now, the 2 languages that we are planning to have it translated into, or will be English and Spanish for now, and we can definitely have conversations if there are other languages that you think we should prioritize at this time. Additionally, with public meetings law, no, it's mostly about transparency, and we'll receive some more training around that as well. Other highlights from the public official training that I've been asked to share with you now are ensuring that those of you that have relationships and interactions with each other outside of this group must be conscious of the fact that as a public advisory group and as a group that operates underneath the city's bylaws, you need to be conscious of when you are in a situation where you have a quorum. So a quorum is 50% plus 1 of the total membership of the advisory body. Additionally, I apologize. Give me 1 second. There are some restrictions on political activity that you need to be conscious of. You are welcome to express your personal political views in this forum, and you can engage in political activities outside of this grouping. But when you're within this body, we should not be spending time during this grouping promoting or opposing candidates or specific ballot measures.
Real quick, but that doesn't include bills, because that would really
talking about
suck.
the state level.
Yeah. If it's not there, that's all the answer I need.
No, I think first of all, when we go through the public official training, that will be more clear what the do's and don'ts are or not. And I think for us, there's a difference when we talk about policy and politics. The elements that go in good policy are about the ideas and the concepts and the consequences and implications. When we talk about politics and we're talking specifically about a specific thing. We won't necessarily be doing that here at this body. So we will be able to deliberate on policy, but we do want to make sure that the conversations remain at the policy level, not politics. But we will give you further guidance, because that's the reason why these are required trainings. It's a new standard and a practice for all city advisory boards and commissions.
Cool.
And we don't want to give you the wrong information and clarify it later, so we'll just say,
Thank you.
We'll hold the numerous amount of questions I have about that for that training.
Thank you. I apologize.
No, you're
as,
good.
you
Good.
know,
Thank you.
as it is new and it's rolling out, there weren't specific talking points for me just yet, so I'm trying to glean.
You're good.
And
Yeah.
quickly
Yeah.
related to that,
Thank you.
There are also, and maybe if we get clarification from the city attorney, it'll be helpful, but just to make a statement of fact, there are legislative bills that the Office of Government Relations has looped with other bureaus about and has formulated a City of Portland position on that bill, and the City of Portland will either support or oppose specific bills. I think the question for the city attorney would be, as Suk said, whether in this group, if we can speak directly to that, or if it would be about the concepts and the policies of those bills. Sounds like a great thing to clarify. I would love to get that clarity, and we will get it.
Yep. I'm going to go write it on the questions.
Okay.
I'll
do that.
And can I make one more
Yes,
comment?
please do.
The point about the quorum, my understanding, and again, better clarity to come when we get the formal training, is that the deliberations here need to be public, right? Like the conversations that you have here that lead to that annual report, they ought to be public. So the intent behind that is to avoid a deliberation of the group that's outside of the public view. That's really all that means. That is my best understanding, and I just wanted to share that too, because that was helpful for me in kind of, well, why is that the way it is? That was helpful for me in understanding that, so I just want to share that too.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone have any questions at this point about what the role of the advisory body serves, what the work will be? Okay, so inside your packet you have summary of policies. Did anyone happen to bring their application, not application packet, but the welcome packet that was sent out to you with you? Okay. You do have a copy of the bylaws inside of the packet that was sent to you. I didn't make a copy for your packet on the table, but I do have some extra copies of bylaws if you would like to have them in front of you for this piece of the conversation. Really quickly, I'll just hit a few key points to make sure everybody's on the same page. So membership is 2 to 3 years, and I'll be asking you individually what you would prefer as your length of term. You may serve up to 3 consecutive terms of service. This group has been designated a group that will continue in perpetuity. And so if you're interested in continuing beyond 8 years, you must sit out for at least 1 term before reapplying. The quorum, as I said, is a simple majority, so it's 50% plus 1. In order to make any formal votes or decisions on actions in the future, we'll need to have a quorum present. And then voting is a majority of the seats present.
if you, for any reason, feel like you can't participate anymore, please let me know as soon as possible. And the bylaws require that you not miss more than 25% of the meetings, if possible. And then if you do need to step down for any reason, I'll need written notice of stepping down. Later tonight, we'll be speaking a little bit more about the leadership roles. Chairperson, we'll have one chair and 2 vice chairs. And then at the next meeting, hopefully at the end of this meeting, you will, some of you will have decided if you would like to nominate yourselves for either of those, any of those positions, and then at the next meeting we will take a vote. And then the chair and vice chairs will work to set the agendas for the subsequent meetings moving forward. You're asked to please not speak on behalf of the group unless it has been decided on by the group and you've been asked to do so. If you're having meetings with legislators or elected officials for other work, please don't represent yourself as a member of CPOT in that discussion unless you have been specifically asked to do so by the group.
Can I make a clarifying question?
Please.
In that situation, you wouldn't be able to say, I am telling you this as a member of CPOT, but would you be able to say, hey, I am a member of this group, and oh, by the way, my personal opinion is XYZ. Is that?
That's my understanding.
Very good.
That's my understanding. Informational, and I think that was my understanding of the conversations around specific bills is informational conversations versus lobbying for a specific
Which is to say, you're not hiding the fact that you're on this group. You can, of course, tell people that. You just are not suggesting that you're speaking on behalf of the group unless it's something that's been officially...
Unless you've specifically been asked by the group to speak on behalf of the group. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
We must have at least 9 meetings in the year, over the course of the year. Right now, they're set for once a month and a 2.5-hour meeting, but that is totally up to you as a group if that's what you want to continue with moving forward. Those can be shortened, they can be adjusted, the day of the week can be adjusted, time of day, but right now we have the room held for the next few months at this date and time. So this is actually the 3rd Thursday, but it's set right now for the 2nd Thursday of each month from 6 to 8:30. Yes.
25% of missed meetings, is that in a calendar year or is that throughout your whole term on the...
That's in the calendar year.
Okay.
I think that's it for the bylaws, the highlights for the bylaws. You can participate through telephonic conferences. I asked if there was any way to do video, go to meeting, enhanced meetings, but we are not there yet.
Did you ask about the hologram option? Is that one?
The small Japanese anime hologram? No, not yet. Does anyone have any questions about the bylaws? Let's check the time.
Is voting considered absentee voting? No?
To the best of my understanding, no.
Okay,
no, so the phone counts as you being
present.
Yes.
We find out you're on the beach, no vote.
I don't think it specifies that.
Okay. Why don't we take just a minute to stretch, go to the restroom. Brandon and I will get things situated for the next section. We're going to go into a little more information about the. Oh, really? Okay. Oh, I am so sorry. We'll do this after the break.
And it's 7:06. When would you like us to return?
Does 7:10 work? 4 minutes? 5 minutes? You need a little more time.
No, it's fine.
You sure?
Sounds good.
You sure? Okay.
I just when I look at the clock, I'm like, it's like 2 minutes.
Oh, that's fine. So let's just take 5 minutes.
So we'll reconvene, let's say 7:12. So we'll reconvene at 7:12. So just to announce, the audio is now recording again, so just be mindful of that.
Anywho,
All right. Well, it was great to meet you again, or see you
I'll
again.
see you next month.
Yes, you will.
Or sooner.
I know.
I haven't put it up yet, but I will put a note on my pad there that there has been a strong and seconded request for coffee or something stronger than decaf tea next time. So noted. So I'd like to take a moment just to share with you, in addition to creating some baseline understanding around other areas of the advisory body's work, the city has also asked that we have a kind of a baseline communication agreement to build off of. And this is just to make sure that we're all, you've all been on these things a million times, you understand that having a framework for us to engage in sometimes challenging dialogue will help keep things moving forward and also help provide us some structure with when we do have points of friction or conflict. So the 4 baseline communication agreements that we've been asked to hold are listen for understanding, or adopting a learner's mindset when we're in this space together. Even without coffee, try to stay engaged. And I will do my best in future meetings to make sure that we're kind of moving around and doing some more interactive work. I know this meeting, you're kind of taking a lot in, and I was trying to decide, should I turn the bylaws into an activity? Should I? It's like, oh, no, it's like the end of the day. Let's just get through the bylaws, and then we can get into the interesting stuff. So when you, when you want to challenge a concept or a conversation, make sure that you're being conscious of challenging the idea that's being discussed, and that you're not responding to maybe some conflict in communication style that you have with the person who's delivering the idea. And also to expect and accept that on many of our conversations and discussions that we won't reach closure in a single meeting. There are parts of the work that you guys will be doing that I'm sure are more like a sprint, and depending on the time of year. And other parts are really this larger kind of marathon towards the ultimate vision, which hopefully you will help to shape. So are there other agreements that you have used in other groups, or ones that you are fond of or prefer? Are there any of these agreements that you have some concerns or opinions about, or anything that you'd like to add?
Seek to understand before being understood really means like to ask as many questions as you can before you try to make a judgment or opinion. Very helpful.
I was going to get a blank page and accidentally grabbed that. So if I'm hearing you clearly, ask questions or seek to understand
before being understood.
Brandon.
Yes.
Anyone else? Anything else I'd like to add? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Oh, now you're going to be subjected to my activity. So, in addition to knowing a little bit about each other, which we shared at the beginning, which was more of kind of like what I do, who I have waiting for me at home, what are my interests. I have found value in taking a moment at the beginning of these sorts of work groups to learn a little bit more about your path and what really drives you to do the work you do, whether it's the advocacy, activist work, or your passion for your business or cannabis rights or drug policy. And I'm going to make you listen to me read a poem. So this is The Way It Is by William Stafford. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change. But it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread. But it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. Sorry, it got a little dark there towards the end. But for me, this particular poem resonates in my own volunteer work and my own path, because I feel like I really connect with the message of there's something deeper that's kind of driving a pursuit of what you're doing, whether that's a passion for justice or access. So if you would humor me and take a moment to think about what that thread might be for you. And I would like for us to go around the table one more time and share a bit about what your thread might be. Why are you here? Why are you doing this work? And if you can think of one story from your own journey that really fuels you to keep going, what might that be?
So, can we start? Yeah. It may not. It's not dark, but it's serious. So I'm an immigrant. My family were immigrants, right? So, and when we came to this country, we lost our father very early on. So we were here, and then a year and a half later, he was killed in an accident. And so we were thrown into a whole host of things you can imagine. This was also in the South, North Carolina. And the importance of community, importance of culture, importance of support and networks were so critical. I mean, it literally saved our lives, our family's life. So as an adult, I think about the experiences my family went through, and then you can start seeing the parallels. We didn't have a cannabis-related issue in our family, but I could easily see the parallel of like the gentleman, you know, how something happens, you get thrown into something, and then all of a sudden, where are your people? Who are your networks? How do you survive, right? And so you can start, what if you have a personal experience where maybe you experienced that, you can start seeing in other stories, they don't have to sound anything close to your own, but you see the dynamics, and then you see the reasons why you can't just think about yourself. You have to think about all the other people who may have similar but different circumstances that we all need to support together. So that's been the thread of my personal life, my professional journey, and just how your own lived experience helps you give an insight into the social change that could benefit us. Thank you, next.
Oh, well, my experience has been as a woman of color, as a Mexicana. I was brought up by my grandmother who was from Chihuahua, Mexico. And the first thing she said to me as a 5-year-old was, "Háblame bien, si no, ni me hables," which means speak to me correctly or don't speak to me at all. And so my life started pretty quick at 5 years old. Anyway, when I grew up, it was in the 60s, drugs, sex, and rock and roll. And I was a teenager, so it was a very difficult time. My high school was Garfield High in East Los Angeles, and every day that I got there, they were playing taps for all of our students who died in Vietnam. So it was a really tumultuous time for me to grow up. But what I clung to was the fact that, my upbringing by my strict grandma and my tias, but also Dr. King. He was there. I'm a daughter of King, that's the way I grew up. So for me, my passion stems from this. To stand in the face of injustice and be silent is to be a co-conspirator. I will not be silent. And that's what I need my passion with. I just care about others. And I care about, don't get me wrong, I'm a capitalist myself, of course, but it bothers me when people are being taken advantage of. And that was the thing that threw me into cannabis so strongly. I started smoking when I was 16, and it's taken me through my whole life. People always say, well, I grew out of that. And I said, yeah, I did it. I made a life out of it. And I really enjoy who I am. I am proud of the things that I've accomplished for cannabis, and in spite of all the other stuff, because people aren't that nice to you when you're a person of color, as a lot of us know, and especially a woman. I'm very upset about the fact that they tell me that there's a hookah bar and it's grandfathered in. Well, could you grandmother me in? Yeah. I've been here since 2009, and so I keep saying that to myself, to stand in the face of injustice, and I have to not be silent. I have to speak up, because I know it doesn't seem like it, but I'm really shy. I really am. People go, what? But I really am. I could say so much more, but I try not to. That's it, who I am.
Alachosa again with Kira. I'm definitely shy. Public speaking isn't my gig, but, when I'm as passionate about cannabis, whenever I'm talking with anybody, whether it's somebody in the industry or somebody out in the public, they can't get me to shut up. There's just so much going on and so much to talk about. I actually just brought up this picture of a fortune cookie that I saw just recently, where it read, "The greatest pleasure in life is doing what people say you cannot do." And, as a 25, 30-year consumer of cannabis, advocate of cannabis for a long time, I never thought I'd see this change in society in my lifetime. So I'm very happy that we're at this point point in time where things are starting to change. I grew up in I'm first generation Filipino, so I grew up in a very strict Catholic family. Cannabis was known as the devil's lettuce. I was a dare kid. My father was in the military, so it wasn't really until college that I really realized that I'd been lied to. So from then on, even though I was always working in the shadows, I was always very passionate about it when I talk to people. Even when I was in the commercial insurance industry, I called myself a professional chameleon, because even though I was a professional suit and tie conference table type of person, I was able to go ahead and become what I was, what I became in the industry and in my prior professional life. So when I came into the industry, I was very excited to see my skill set really able to translate into cannabis. Because to be honest, when I first joined the company, I was the oldest guy in the company, and I was 45 at the time. So it was nice to be able to start changing things, not only in the business world, but also to be able to participate in groups like this. Again, being able to mainstream it out in society and to be able to talk openly about it with friends, families, colleagues, state regulators, whoever, because we're all learning at the same time, and hopefully we can get some things done this year. I'm really excited to where we're going.
Danny Rowland here again. Where's my thread? I suppose it kind of falls along I always like to step up to a challenge, and there's been a whole lot of them in this industry. And so I kind of follow a chivalric virtue structure in my life, and justice is one of those things. And when I see people in what happened in this industry was I saw a whole bunch of people getting shut down and not knowing what to do and not knowing how to pursue things and not knowing where to go and getting so frustrated and angry and not understanding that there was other paths and other ways to achieve their goals, that I felt like I could step in and champion for them as a client advocate and, be a person who understands how some of the inner workings of the city go together, and especially when everything was changing as regulatory stuff changed between the medical and the recreational. We were right on the edge of it, and there were so many conflicting rules and things. I worked through it with a whole bunch of people, and like, this doesn't make sense, this does make sense, can we get this person this, and helping those people get through it, and then seeing them, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've had this permit open since 2015 or whatever. It's like, wow, thank you so much. It's a good thing to feel like you can help people achieve something when they're almost ready to give up. So I think that's been my whole life. I've been always always trying to champion or go after the hardest thing that I can possibly accomplish. So, and that wasn't really happening for me in construction, but then the cannabis stuff popped up. I was like, hey, here's a challenge. So I'm after it now.
Nicole Bowles, OHSU. I'm having difficulty just picking one thread. I'm also trying not to think about what I'm going to say and listen, so we'll see how this comes together. But the first thing that popped in my head was my dad, who had multiple sclerosis, and he was diagnosed 6 years before I was born. And I remember my mom, when he was in the later stages of the disease, not necessarily meaning to, but talking about when he was younger using cannabis, as his doctor suggested in the late 80s and early 90s, to help with his symptoms, which he said in like a negative light, because that was the stigma, or that is the stigma, usually surrounding the use of cannabis, especially in the African American community, or at least my community it was. And so the fact that he suffered, though, with the multiple sclerosis is what got me interested in doing research. And so I think it's interesting, or perhaps it's always kind of been in the back of my mind, that the one thing that did help him, because I remember, was cannabis. And he would use a lot of the new treatments that came around, and I feel like I would just see him get worse as a result of them. And the only thing that really did seem to help was the use of cannabis. And so now we have 20 years later, it's like one of the only things, like, as far as proven use use meta-analysis. It's like multiple sclerosis is the only thing that comes out, and so I think that's just interesting. But going full circle, I'm not necessarily studying multiple sclerosis, but I am now studying the impact, or trying to look at the mechanisms of action of why cannabis works with various ailments. And so, so I think, it was the multiple sclerosis that got me started with research, but in the back of my mind, I was always kind of interested in the endocannabinoid system, as well as the exogenous system. So, I think that's at least one thread that's got me here today.
This is kind of a personal one, so I'm going to be a little bit cryptic when I say, especially considering being recorded too. I remember the day that I was sitting in my kitchen in my little tiny 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of the desert. I did the Peace Corps in Morocco, and I was in Morocco, and it was becoming the end of my 2 years there, and I had an internship opportunity in Italy that I could have taken, or I could come to Oregon and work on a vineyard, which is what I was thinking I was going to do, have a career in the wine industry at that time. And it was really hard to turn down that job in Italy because that was, come on, we don't want to do that, right? But I just had this gut feeling that there was something in Oregon that I was supposed to be doing and a reason for me to go there. And I remember turning down that internship, coming back to the U.S. and getting on that plane. I stayed at home for 2 weeks after being away for 2 years, and I came out to Oregon. But I remember that flight and just feeling like something big is going to happen. And I don't know what it is, but I'm supposed to be on this plane. And to go from arriving alone, sight unseen, with no support network here, and to see what I've been able to build for myself over 5 years and a lot of hard work, it's just really amazing. And so it just feels like this is a continuation of not knowing what comes next, but just feeling like I'm supposed to be here. So I'm here.
What is my thread? I've been an activist my entire life. The first persuasive paper I ever wrote in 6th grade was why. I've been an anti-prohibitionist my whole life. The first persuasive paper I wrote in 6th grade was why we should legalize gum chewing in class, because no one was stopping chewing gum. It just went under the seat when you got caught. And so, and I forget that often, but that was the start of my advocacy career on behalf of my peers. The moment, the real thing that happened, I've only been sharing this publicly over like the last year, I got busted as a senior in high school. I was constantly in leadership positions. As a senior, I was ASB vice president, so I ran the morning and afternoon assemblies. I did the morning and afternoon announcements, and on the last day of senior year, got busted for being intoxicated on campus. And at the time, I didn't know my rights, and did a field sobriety test, which I failed by one question. They brought me down to the principal's office, called my mom in. They gave me an ultimatum. They said, either get out of here right now, because you're a bad example and we need you out of here, or you have to take a 2-hour drug and alcohol counseling course because we think you have a serious problem. And I was going to college, I had good grades, really didn't like St. Helens High School for all the reasons that some of you may be more aware of now. But my mother said, no, you're going to walk with your class. You're going to go take that 2-hour class. So after admitting the fact that I had used cannabis, I drank as a teenager, still had good grades, was going to college, this counselor looked up at me at the end of this 2-hour session and smiled and said, Sam, I'm sorry you had to come here today. There's nothing wrong with you. And I didn't know it until a year later, and I got to college and I discovered a group called Students for Sensible Drug Policy. And that was a group that now has over 120 chapters around the world that advocates on a variety of issues, from educating students on how to deal with police encounters to what happens when you mix MDMA and alcohol together. Because that was education that students needed that they were not getting. And so that was my interest into what I call broad-scale drug policy reform. Specifically, I got into more cannabis advocacy when I got noticed by a couple of medical cannabis activists in Eugene in 2010 and got my first job on the Measure 74 campaign as a 19-year-old trying to convince college students to care about medical marijuana. Probably the hardest job in cannabis I've ever had. But more than anything, the experience I had as a senior moving into the college realm where, I was working on drug policy really helped me realize and recognize my privilege as a white male in society. I got lucky. I got to go to college. I got lucky I didn't get tossed in jail, whether it was because the color of my skin or the state that I happen to live in. And that's an experience that really has continued to be the fuel for my fire in advocating for sensible policies, is that, my privilege was my luck. And that is something that a lot of people don't have. And I have friends who have been in those same situations with very different outcomes that are still in jail across the country. And so that's why I do this work. And that's what I mean when I say that I'm going to be always an advocate first. So that's my thread.
Stephanie from Oregon's Finest again. So let's see. I also grew up in the DARE program, the War on Drugs, like many of us here. And it greatly affected my viewpoints in the world, and I judged my stepmother very harshly for her cannabis usage, to the point where it actually kind of affected my relationship as an adult all the way, now over 20 years later. And it wasn't until I got a traumatic brain injury from a bicycle accident on Broadway and started using medical cannabis as a patient at Oregon's Finest to get off of opiates and stop taking pharmaceuticals. The one day I had this epiphany that my entire perspective of my childhood was wrong. My stepmother was not the bad guy. And it took me 30 years to apologize to her. So that was my aha moment.
Boy. So that's a big question, huh? So I grew up the daughter of an immigrant, the first American-born of the family, in a very small, all-white town. We were the only immigrants in that town. My brother was born 8 years later with special needs. And my mom didn't speak English. She didn't know how to communicate with the schools or the doctors or anyone about his condition and how to best help him. So he suffered, and she would ask me to help her write letters, to help her talk to people, translate for her, help her to communicate what he needed and what was going wrong with his care. And so I think that we quickly realized that the government system can be unjust, and not everybody gets all the same things, even though they have the right to those things. And so I think at that very young age, I realized that it didn't matter what we did or said, we weren't going to get what everyone else had. So that really put in my mind that I needed to find a way to fix things. And I got in my head that I was going to become a lawyer. So I worked hard. I went to NYU undergrad. I went to law school right after that. I passed the bar. I went to law school in George Washington, Washington, D.C. I worked for the federal court system there. I then took the bar in New York, moved to New York City, and I worked as a discrimination litigation attorney in the Federal Second Circuit Court. And I pushed for discriminatory rights, basically until I realized that the firm I worked for didn't really care about the plaintiffs we were representing. And I think once my caseload got so big that I realized how many people we were failing, I left. And luckily I took some cases with me. I started my own firm. I did that for 3 years until my sister-in-law unfortunately was getting worse and worse. My sister-in-law had an incurable disease that she suffered from for all her life, and she had very bad seizures. And so the seizures were getting worse and worse, and we learned about cannabis, and we knew cannabis could help her, but it wasn't legal. And unfortunately, she passed away before we could get her cannabis. And so it was at that moment that my husband and I looked at each other and were like, this just can't happen again. It's not right. And we need to do something to help. We need to learn about cannabis. We need to figure out how to get it, how to make it, how to help people, especially people who can't represent themselves and can't get that information. And, you know, notoriously minority communities are very anti-cannabis, as I'm sure some of you know. And so we really wanted to be a part of that change, and that led us to Oregon and our company and what we do now. So I think that's it in a nutshell.
John, Finance Family Farms. I'd have to say education, understanding when it comes to city policy, state policy. I kind of live in a rock. I'm a micro tier 2 operator, solo. I do it all by myself, so I don't get out much. So to be a part of this board is very enlightening. I look forward to getting to know each and every one of you. Short of reading on what's going on online, you know, I'm a very busy person. As I said, I'm a father of 2 kids. I do have a significant other. She has 3 kids, so between the 2 of us, we have a Brady Bunch. You know, it comes down to passion for the plant, cultivation methods, sustainability. I learned farming through cannabis first, and I am now learning how to become a regular American farmer and all of what that entails. And I'd like to see that change. It's one of those things that I have a lot of passion for, because there's a lot of practices that could be better. So that's why I'm here.
Hold on. What's my thread? So I'll tell you why I'm here and what I'm doing this work is for years I've worked with, over the last 10 years, I've been growing a long time. And before that, involved in the cannabis industry in one way or another, you know. And so I've worked with every pot attorney in Portland over the last 10, 15 years, trying to figure out ways to in and out, and how am I going to be able to grow weed and still participate. I remember when the first medical dispensary was in a townhouse over off like Powell and 138. I'm sure some of you might remember that too. And that's when I decided to get a medical card. I'd grown for a decade without one. I was like, hiding behind the cart. And I was glad I did. Figured out how to do that. So while I'm here, for a long time I've been watching people who weren't afraid to come out and talk about cannabis, because they didn't really have anything to lose 20 years ago. They were just buying it from their buddy. But a lot of people, obviously not everybody. I feel like people who were back there in the day doing it before carbon filters and stuff probably weren't as quick to come out and talk about it publicly. I know I wasn't. It took a while. So I'm here because I feel like I watched so much of the policy get shaped by the bench warmers, that then came out when it was safe. And I sat back with my buddies and we would mock and complain and not be stoked on the policies that were being created. And so I need to come out and be a part of it and just sit back and chastise people. So, come on, I'll look into it. No, but seriously, I just need to either be part of it out here and try to move forward. So, don't really have any stories from my experience other than what I just said. But yeah, so stoked to be here.
My name is Arania, City of Portland with the Cannabis program. Pretty much my thread is accepting differences regardless of race, gender, or culture. Why am I here? To be honest, before I started working here, I knew nothing about cannabis or regulation about cannabis. But my family is not for cannabis at all. So as I started working here, I started to learn more information, and I'm like, this is some great stuff that's going on with cannabis for consumers, for business owners. and it's going to continue to grow. So pretty much I want to help people become more aware of cannabis who are closed-minded, and I want them to understand how we strive as the city to keep parameters safe for consumers and business owners.
Well, before I mention anything, I'd like to honestly say thank you to all those who've shared very deep thoughts that we think people all think about afterwards. I'm here with not focused on cannabis. In fact, until I went to the CCC conference, which I was invited to by my colleague here, and got some rubble on oil, I had never had any product. Now, that's not entirely true. When I was about 23, I went to a Rolling Stones concert. You just had to inhale. There are probably three threads, but I'll just pick on two of them. One is that my real is a thread of the fine arts. I grew up as a painter. I went to RISD, which Rhode Island School of Design, and I still paint a great deal. And what am I doing dealing with codes? How bizarre, to say the least. And the answer is that I'm the other thread. I come out of a background also very focused on issues related to justice. I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, which when I was in high school was an occupied city by the military. It's after the riots that started in Watts, and witnessed some pretty brutal things. I too am a child of that era, and remember the war in Vietnam very deeply. I lost a brother there. If you take all of those in terms of the fact that you have to do something, you have to react, you have to participate. When this opportunity came up, the director's suggestion to kind of take this on, I wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it because it was a place that I think the whole city, the whole state, the nation needs to address a very serious issue, and I look at it as an issue to be addressed, not necessarily focused on what that product happens to be about, although the scientific thread of me is fascinated with the findings that have been mentioned already that are coming out.
This is hard. Okay, why am I here? So, as a performance auditor, I gravitate towards government regulation. I've done audits when I worked for the state at the OLCC, looking at how the OLCC sells, but at the same time also regulates alcohol. I've recently completed a project of short-term rentals here at the city of Portland and how the city regulates that. And I'm just fascinated by this whole idea of government. How does government get involved? And there's government overreach. There's places government doesn't get involved, and why is that? When they should be. There's places where they get over-involved and over-regulate, and again, why is that? And all those questions. And I'm also from an immigrant family, and I grew up in Czechoslovakia. And so my parents emigrated when I was about 12 years old. And I've just been fascinated with this whole topic about the role of government. Because as a kid, I was told, government is this thing you fear. And my parents were persecuted for speaking out against the government. My father was in prison for it. My grandfather was in prison for it. So as a performance auditor, when it comes to government, kind of shining the light on government services and asking those questions, I thought of becoming a journalist, but I realized as a performance auditor, I have access to a lot more information and can impact policy much, much better. So that's kind of why I'm here, and I'm fascinated by by cannabis regulation, by the cannabis industry, because it is so evolving and so new, and there's so many ways you can go and so many angles you can look at, and so that's why I'm here. But.
I'm Brandon with the Cannabis program. I guess guess there are a lot of threads. I'll try to keep it brief. Justice and fairness. When I was a kid, my mom would say to me kind of a lot, do this. I'd say why. And she'd say because I said so, and I'd say, well, why is that? And she wouldn't want to explain it to me. And I feel like that sentiment I've approached that, I've experienced that in my work way too often. It's really frustrating to be told that because I care and want to try to make something better that I need to shut up, or that because I want to be honest about something that I'm wrong, that I should just perpetuate the way things were done before. I'm not interested in that at all. And hearing everybody talk, this is an incredible group of people. I mean, I feel really lucky to sit in this seat for however much longer I do. And the other piece I want to share is when I was a kid, I mean, a couple people have talked about their experiences with DARE. And yeah, I was one of those kids too. I was one of those kids who thought that cannabis and heroin were equally harmful. And I lost friends over it. And I think about how my life could have been different had I carried that forward. If maybe I had really, really thought that heroin would affect me the same way as cannabis. I think about experiences when I was a teenager, and I don't care if it's a public meeting. I mean, I smoked cannabis when I was a teenager and got caught by the cops, and it was me and 3 other white dudes, and we were let go. And like, I think about that all the time, more and more now as I do this work, about if the color of my skin had been different, that wouldn't have happened. I mean, it was Corvallis, super white town. And justice, fairness, that's why I'm here.
Actually, Dr. Knox, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, would you mind going next?
Sure. So I think we're talking about what fuels us and why we're here.
Yeah. So what is the thread that kind of binds you to this work?
Oh gosh, it's so varied. I guess my thread starts at the beginning. Started with first uncovering what's known about the history of the classical use of cannabis in ancient medicine. So ancient Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, Native American healing, and the history of the American medical use from 1850s to 1930s. Doctors prescribed it regularly. The truth about a prohibition, that was not rooted in any way in science or evidence. And then when you juxtapose that to the legalization movement that's beholden to the highest standards, validating its medical use through the right science, the right evidence, which actually does exist, but prohibition and legalization being held to completely two different standards. I mean, that really riles me up. I wear my MTBA hat because the intent and consequences of the war on drugs and the role it played, developing the industrial prison complex, for example, and destroying communities of color while it did that, juxtaposed with the legalization scheme that benefits corporations and ignores those most harmed by the construct in the first place that fuels me the discovery of the endocannabinoid system, right? We know that all principal components were known by 1995, but I didn't learn that in medical school. I didn't even learn it as part of basic human physiology, and it's the most important aspect of our physiology, right? It's been over 20 years since it's been discovered, and we're just now starting to introduce it to medical students. And this really extends to what's known about the pharmacology of cannabis and the components, but we didn't learn that either. And then, unfortunately, despite all this information, doctors continuing to advocate for it even, or against it without being fully informed themselves. Part of the reason I wanted to get involved with the Oregon Cannabis Commission, well, for one, it's been tasked with really overhauling the medical program and rewriting the medical program here in Oregon. It's because California, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, when they legalized in 96 and 98, didn't take any data. We don't, over the 20-some years that these programs have existed, we've had the opportunity to collect rich data on medical market trends, benefits, harms, etc. These programs really dropped the ball, and the regulations didn't, enforce that they do that. And I truly believe fundamentally you cannot properly regulate something that you haven't taken the time to truly understand. So I am very passionate about education for all stakeholders in the industry, and that's patients, consumers, to communities of color, to industry, to regulators, medical professionals, even researchers. Like, it's super paramount to structure good policy to have this education, because, you know, we need informed representatives from all these groups to always be present at any roundtables to have these discussions. I mean, all of that fuels me. I can go on. Hypocrisy of legal cigarettes, alcohol, pharmaceuticals, processed foods even, you know, and other commodities in common use that are significantly more harmful than cannabis. That hypocrisy really aggravates me. And like Madeline said, the silence is a co-conspirator, but so is willful ignorance and willful hypocrisy. And really, lastly, I'm a clinician. I've seen cannabis and cannabinoid therapeutics work for my patients, whether improving quality of life or reducing tumor burden. I mean, we've had patients who did not even pursue conventional therapies like chemo or radiation therapy at their own request. You know, we don't recommend that, but see reduction in their tumors. And I've also seen it not work. And this is really important. You know, cannabis is as diverse as all of our, you know, endocannabinoid systems are individual. You know, it can take some trial and error to figure out how cannabis can work or what chemical profile works, you know, et cetera. And, you know, the matter at hand is that patients are using cannabis right now, despite what research does tell us or doesn't tell us. And I feel it's the duty of clinicians to be available now to help patients work through the, you know, the trial and error process safely and pragmatically when necessary. You know, people dismiss the patient experience as anecdote, but even in the conventional medical world where, you know, anecdote is also diminished, don't get me wrong, but that anecdote becomes really rich data when this process is tracked in the clinic. So all of those things drive me and complete my thread, I think. And I'm here because I care about righting all of these things, righting all the wrongs that exist in all these areas. You know, in the words of one of my fellow MCBA board members, it's hard to implement programs to address these things without existing policy that facilitates and protects them. And, you know, because I am a clinician, I really am in sort of the center of where everybody in the industry intersects with that consumer, that patient. So everything that all of you guys do is really, really important to me, because what you do really does either support or impede what I'm able to do with the patient when they're sitting next to me. You know, are the products in the marketplace medical quality? Are they safe for even the most immunocompromised? Even if that immunocompromised patient did not get a medical card, right? They're just going to a dispensary to get whatever they can. And when even those products aren't safe for their consumption, then what have we done with respect to public health? So somebody said, like, you can go in any direction in cannabis. I love cannabis, even like metaphorically, because it really does challenge all of us to confront a lot of social inequities and harms, and, you know, from racism to you know, the alleged free market society and everything in between. It's pretty awesome what you're involved in and what impacts it can have for the greater cannabis, you know, commoditized world. So that's why I'm here, guys.
Thank you. So I'll just speak really quickly so we can address the rest of the agenda, but my thread, I think, really has to do with the role that policy at the local level and also at the state and federal level can have on shaping norms and changing the language with which we speak about something and the direct access that any individual has or barriers that they experience, and that those are felt much more strongly by some than others or experience more. And I think that growing up in a family with very little money gives you an awareness of the injustice and an inflated sense of the need for justice and to do something about it. I saw my father. We came to the United States from Japan when I was 3, but I saw my father work very hard as a gardener, even though he had a degree from a university in Tokyo, but he didn't speak English, and so it was at a time where there just weren't a lot of opportunities for that to translate over into opportunity for him here, and so we struggled quite a bit, and I kind of carried that sense of fairness and need for fairness into my later life, and the point at which kind of cannabis comes into my world is when I was considering a career change and was trying to decide between going into direct healthcare or public health. I worked in an AIDS hospice and got to form really strong relationships with individuals who were at an extremely low point in their health and so vulnerable in so many ways, and did my best to support them in. At the time, there was medical cannabis available if you could get a doctor to help you access it, and I saw people have to struggle to establish those relationships and set that up just to get access to it, and then face barriers once they got it to the fact that the policies within the hospice were that you could have it in your room and you could consume it, but staff couldn't help you set it up or couldn't help you consume it. So if you are I saw people who were struggling to get through their normal day-to-day living, who I had to try and figure out ways to help them consume their cannabis. But when they did, I got to see this amazing transformation for some of them in the drug regimen that they were needing. And I got to see people phase out certain medications that they no longer needed to help stimulate their appetite and deal with nausea and all kinds of things. And just, it really connected again with me, with my own sense of injustice and patient rights and access to therapies and medications. That the access was being blocked based on misconceptions and poor information that was guiding regulation. So for me, that is what I think about now when I do this work. I think about those individuals who, some of them I held their hand when they exited this life, but I got to see for some of them what this experience was and what medical marijuana did for them. So that was really powerful for me, and that's something that I carry with me. So I want to acknowledge, and I apologize, we are way off on the agenda, but I really wanted to make time for this conversation and for us to take a moment at the beginning of our work to connect with each other in this way. There are two other large things in addition to making time for public comment at the end of the meeting, and I wanted to give you the option. We have about 15 minutes left before opening the floor for public comment, right? Yep. And Brandon has an overview of the cannabis program. He can
jet through it in about 15 minutes, maybe, or we can wait and start the next meeting if you'd like with that overview, and then launch into our work on identifying kind of what's working and what's not, and set some priorities. We also need to take a moment to discuss if anybody is interested in nominating themselves for the chair or vice chair positions. And then I have a handout that is in your folder that is kind of a review of the priorities that have been identified by other focus groups or advisory groups that many of you have been involved with. And that's really just to kind of prime you for that conversation and that work that we'll be doing at the upcoming meetings. So with your permission, my recommendation and suggestion would be that we hold on the program overview until the start of the next meeting and prioritize some other things. But if you have thoughts about that, please feel free to share those right now, because this is definitely could be a discussion.
Brandon, would you prefer to wait?
I have no preference. I'd like the group to.
Let's do it. I'm down. I'm here. Let's do it.
Yeah. And then that way, the next meeting, we can just get on to stuff we got to get on to. And,
Okay.
you know what I mean?
Okay.
I mean, that's just me. What's up?
Sure. So then, how about, if you don't mind just rearranging the order of things really quickly, are there any of you that have that would like to nominate yourself or would be interested in taking one of those either vice chair or chair positions at this point? Have you considered that?
Could you describe what that
Right.
would entail?
Right. Yes, thank you. So the chair position would be leading the work and helping to set the agendas for the upcoming meetings and helping to plan out once the priorities for the group have been identified, how we want to move towards forming those into an overall report, helping to identify what groups or individuals we might want to bring in to further educate and inform the group. And then the vice chair supports the chairperson with those duties, may step in if the chair is absent, would be working closely with the chair and myself to help set the agendas.
How long are these positions held for? The chairperson, the vice chairperson?
Annual? Do you know? Do you know?
Depends on the bylaws. So,
Should be.
It's also my understanding that you can nominate yourselves today, think on it, and then we come back next meeting. So
yeah,
if you don't have, if you're unsure, something you can think on. Always throw your hat in the ring and pull it back out too. So just things to think about.
It does not. It does not dictate the length of appointment.
Tell you though.
Come on, like every regular nonprofit. Like,
Is it your understanding that if it's not specified in the bylaws, then that means the group may decide how long that position is held? Is that your understanding?
That is my understanding. That would be my assumption.
Is there a process to change or add bylaws?
Great question.
Yes, there is a way to amend the bylaws. They have to be, my understanding, again, I'll use that term a lot, we're continuing to learn, have to be approved by the group and then approved by the bureau director. But yes.
Is there a 2/3 majority overrule of the bureau director?
Not described in the bylaws.
That's a joke.
Thumb wrestle.
Why don't you think about it for the next bit?
And staff, as in staff here, and if you could just note that let's make sure that question of if it's not in the bylaws, it's something the group can decide. I think that's important to clarify.
Yeah.
And then we'll specifically ask about the chair positions. And also, we have to be mindful about the correspondence that we do over email. That again, this is a public body, deliberating publicly. But I think, again, my understanding is that if it's a question about process, that's something we can do behind the scenes and try to work it out and get it back to you all. So thank you for your patience.
Yeah. And my understanding with that also would be that people can provide their self-nomination through email, and we would bring all those to the next meeting.
That is my understanding, but let's double check that too.
Okay.
Are we not allowed to nominate other people? Is it specifically precluded
It is
in
not
the bylaws? I guess is the question that we're going on.
within the bylaws.
That was my question.
Can you nominate other
Correct.
people? Okay, so this seems like there's some pretty relevant questions that I need to get some clarification around. So why don't we? Can we set that aside? Does that have to happen at this first meeting?
No.
Okay.
It does not.
Okay.
So we can set it
So-
aside. And as we get clarity on this stuff, what we can and can't share over email and how much nomination can happen over email, let's make sure that we clarify all those points as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And I will circle back with you as soon as I get that information and share that information with you.
And I think, one more just a thought that I'm going to have for public advisory experts is whether if we do some deliberation, not even deliberation, but if we share information over email, if we didn't capture that in a document that's then uploaded and is there for the public and that kind of thing, if there's a way that we can meet the spirit, intent, and letter of those laws in a way that provides the maximum amount of flexibility.
Okay, so just to clarify, the information, I will come back to you with the information if by the end of the meeting you have, if you would like to step forward and nominate yourself for one of the positions, then fantastic, we will record that, and otherwise I will circle back with you about the other information about can you provide me with the self-nomination via email after this meeting, and also clarification on whether or not we can nominate other people. Sound good? Okay. No. Got it. Not yet. Okay, Brandon?
We have 15 minutes for the rest of the whole meeting, and we have 10 minutes for public comment. I can't do this in 5 minutes.
Yeah. I apologize to the group.
Can I just skip to the very last slide and just speak to that? And I would still, I think, like to do this at the next meeting.
Yeah, it's necessary.
It's
a long way.
I timed this meeting and got it done in 10 minutes, 40 seconds.
Yeah.
So if you could just
go to the last slide.
Be key to the last slide. Just
These slides are also going to be available to you
yes.
shortly after the meeting. So if you wanted to look through them on your own before the next meeting, you can.
So
What's
much
your last
great
slide?
stuff in there.
You should just do a voiceover.
Yeah. So that's second last slide. So
this one.
That's a good one. Let's leave it there. So
okay.
The summary, and we're going to do the whole presentation next meeting. This program was built imperfectly. The regulations are not perfect today, and they won't be perfect tomorrow. But the point is that we try to get it right, that we change, that we listen, that we say we messed up and that we do something about it. That's the point. And again, as I said earlier, that's something I care about personally. I know Sook cares about personally. Our whole program does. And that's necessary for any new regulatory framework, not just cannabis. So the full presentation speaks to the ways in which that has happened and the ways in which we need to go further, but this body is going to be critical in helping us do that, and I'm excited. So that's my spiel.
You have a summary of Portland's cannabis policies inside your packet. You also have the summary and review of the different focus areas that have been discussed by other advisory groups and task force groups over time. And I wanted to just bring attention really quickly here in our last few minutes to the shifting priorities. As all of you have probably experienced and are familiar with, that the focus when back into 2015 and also in 2016 when things first started to come together was much more around regulation and ensuring and highlighting public safety, but the conversation has really shifted over time, and it's been a necessary shift, and the themes and the tone of the conversation now, with the help of groups like the Minority Cannabis Cabinet, has really shifted and started to impact changes within the program and the language that's being used and the focus of future priorities. So please take some time before the next meeting to review some of the work that's been done by your colleagues and your peers and other community members. And we'll use that after Brandon's presentation at the beginning as a jumping off point.
And one more brief thing, I think I use this talking point a lot, but it's a good one. In 2015, I was on the job for, I think it was my first week when this code language first passed, September 15. And then Mayor Hales, at the time, at the birth of that code language, said this stuff has got to change over time. That's been true from day one. And so that, I think, frankly, I think that got lost for a while. And, but that was the intent from the beginning. So we ought to honor that. We ought to honor that intent. Yeah, that's it.
So I want to stick to the segment of time that has been set aside for public comment. Oh, where'd it go? Oh, I'm sorry.
I may have accidentally deleted it slightly.
It's okay. Is there anybody here who would like to speak? Yeah? Okay. Feel free.
Did I get all 10 minutes? No, I'm just kidding. Earl stand, that's fine. Hi, I'm Mike Rockland. Brandon, wonderful. Come a long ways. Really doing really good. Really admire what he's done and this organization has done for the city. I really think it's a model, not just for the state. I think other states will get calls from. I look at Oregon, and I just pointed to Portland. So, but I'm also a nurse. I'm an RN. I've been in public health for a long time. I've done hospital nursing, and I really like what I heard earlier. I've also got my stories. I won't bore you with it. Back in the 60s, we were self-medicating. We didn't know it. Okay. Now I know a lot more about it. I've been studying cannabinoids for about 5 years. My previous specialty was pain management, so it just fits right in. And the biggest issue I see coming up is we need a pilot test for opioid withdrawals. You know, maybe use a little bit of that money, go over to Hooper Clinic and do something about it, okay? We've been substituting narcotics for narcotics, and that's just not good. People have to be on for life. I'd rather be on cannabinoids. It's not toxic, won't kill people, and it's therapeutic. We have plenty of evidence for pain, sleep, and other things. My background's really broad. I've done a lot of stuff like Al here. I was in risk, and I think that translates really well to this mainstream industry, if you want to call it that. But we need more equity. That's really what it's about. You know, being a nurse, I'm interested in social justice and equity because that impacts the people I've taken care of and still see happening. In this state, we've got about 25% of the population is unmedicated. It's a million people. So think about that. We only have 40,000, 30+ thousand carnivores, but those are steady patients. The rest of them that got new stuff 15 are plummeting. That's where the drop is going. So think about that. It's not the people that need it, it's the people that decided they could get, you know, discounts, save taxes, that we're dropping off. People that really need it need donations. So that's what I'm working on right now. It's a project called Project Scarecrow, which is basically to lay the pathway through OLCC to help get rid of the excess that'll help with diversion, things like that. But what I'm really interested in is what you're doing here. Because again, as the city is a model, talked to Brandon before, I looked through the BDS process, just from helping people and found some issues. He helped with communication, that got improved. That's what really impressed me. Okay, that was early on. And so with this organization, what you're doing, I really think it's a great thing. I really think that, you know, it sends the message in the right way. This is the culture I want to see coming out of Portland. It's a social issue. It is very much a social and cultural issue. But there's therapeutic benefits. And so I'm really excited about the diversity and the passion going on here. This is just like, it really speaks to what we need as a nation, because this is going to be a major election issue in 2020, no doubt about it. And so from just a legalization standpoint, it doesn't hold up. From a medical standpoint, you know, it's been upheld in the Ninth Circuit Court, and now around the country, you look at discrimination, all these other things happening, it has to do with medical. Legalization by itself won't help people with discrimination. But together with medical, with the court systems, there's a lot of court cases that are going on right now that have been going on for discrimination. And it really has to do with the right to use something that's so ancient, really. You know, Chinese medicine, like Dr. Rachel talked about, has been going on. There's 10,000 years of evidence as far as being able to use herbs and needles. It's only the last 100 years where all this education has been cut off from the medical schools, including the Chinese schools of medicine, all these other medical schools, naturopaths. So it's time to bring them in the fold. The people I work with the best, besides the cannabinoologists like Dr. Rachel Knox and her family, are naturopaths, because they get it, herbalists, they get it. This is what part of their, and Chinese medicine specialists. So I'm really excited for this to be happening, and thank you very much for this.
Great. Thank you. Okay, again, I apologize for getting off of our agenda. I will work to keep things tighter next time. I felt like the conversation was so valuable. I appreciate you allowing us to get off of schedule today. But we will dive right in next time and hopefully have a chair and vice chair vote early on so that you guys can take over and I can support you. And in addition to staying on a tight agenda next time and having coffee or caffeinated tea, are there any other things that I can do to improve things for the next upcoming meeting for you, or anything I can do to help support?
I have a comment that I would just like to make, because last year I was blessed to be asked by the Hispanic Congressional Hispanic Caucus Panel Institute to speak on the social implications of the legalization of marijuana, or cannabis, they call it marijuana. And I think that it's very telling about where our government is going in general. If the Congressional Hispanic Caucus is asking me to go speak about it, I mean, it just opened up my eyes to the reality. They think it's going to be legal by the end of the year. You know what I mean? It's just so real, and I think this work is so important. I'm so glad to be part of this.
Thank you. Good. Well, yes.
I was just hoping that maybe we could talk next time about conflict of interest a little more. I'm a little confused on it. I mean, I work in the industry. I deal directly with the industry. I feel like I'm going to say I have a conflict of interest every single time you ask. So
counted about 30 this meeting.
That may be. That may be.
So I just want to understand that more. So.
I will make sure that we, if I can get Tony to come.
It's my understanding it's all about disclosure. Yeah, it's all about being honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I may be wrong.
And that's part of the public official orientation.
Especially for us that own cannabis businesses and in the city of Portland. I mean,
We still want to hide them. Like, actually, I don't own that.
And those trainings are going to be scheduled soon, or will be online? I didn't catch the part about when and where and
Yes.
those.
So I am working to schedule those. Some of them are in the process of being finalized as far as the online trainings, and the public official training is in this weird space where they're providing it in person sometimes, but they're also working hard to finish up the online option. So I will try and get clarification on some of the existing questions, and then more information around the conflict of interest piece for you before the next meeting, whether that's trying to get Tony here in person or getting somebody else who can speak to some of those questions to answer some of those up front for you. Oh, if you have your signature pages, I have a couple of extras that I can collect those now.
I think we need extras.
I think I signed it electronically. My gut says that's what I would have done had you told me if there's nothing physical to sign.
Yes.
Well, I asked her.